special guest today is the editor at thefriendlyatheist.com. He appears on the Atheist Voice channel on YouTube, co-hosts the Friendly Atheist Podcast. He's a former National Board Certified high school math teacher who taught for 7 years. He's been featured on CNN, Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, has served on the board of the directors for Foundation Beyond Belief and the Secular Student Alliance. His books include I Sold My Soul on eBay, The Young Atheist Survival Guide, and his most recent book that he co-authored and edited that was titled Queer Disbelief. We're very fortunate to have Hemant Mehta back in Central Florida, and this is for at least the third time that I know of. He was actually here in March 2015, and then in March 2017 for our Freethought cruise, and now we're seeing March here. So based on this simple mathematical series, I'm going to predict March 2021. All right, so I want you to also be very warm to Hemant because he's been very generous in his sharing of information about our organization. He's covered our organization more than 30 separate times, which is pretty tremendous, and so please give a warm welcome and thank you to Hemant.
Thank you all for being here tonight. If I'm looking at my phone, it's because that's where I have my notes. What I want to talk about is this question up here: is atheism the last taboo in politics? And I'll tell you where I'm getting that from. But basically, the stuff I write about, if you haven't seen my website at all, it's a lot less of the God delusion, here's why God doesn't exist stuff, and a lot more of here's how atheism plays out in our culture. And here's how religion plays out, and here's where it's good and bad. And that's a lot of what I cover, so that's what I wanted to talk about. I figured I should give you some caveats, though, for this particular talk. One is, this is going to sound really partisan, and I swear that's not on purpose. That's just the nature of being an atheist talking about politics. But this is not a partisan speech, or at least I'm not trying to be, and I'll explain a little more about that later. The other caveat here is that in a speech about atheism and politics, part of the thing I want to talk to you about is why it would be important to have open atheists in any elected office. But with that comes the caveat that we don't necessarily need atheists in public office. Like, you're not going to believe this, I have voted for religious people in previous elections, even for president. Shocking. And that's okay because there are plenty of religious people who support church-state separation and science education, and they're totally fine. This isn't a knock on any of them. So take that as you will. And the other thing I want to talk about is, here's why I do want atheists in public life. Because symbolism matters. Like, it matters when you see an African-American person in Congress, or a bisexual senator, or a transgender state senator. Like, that stuff makes a difference. And one reason it does is because, I'll ask you, go ahead and raise your hand if you have ever told somebody, you got to know somebody, you tell them you're an atheist, and their first response is, oh, but I thought you were a good person. Right? Because there's a stigma attached to the word atheist that groups like this one and other ones are trying to change, but that's a hard sell. I mean, telling someone you're an atheist, they scrunch up their face at it. But at the same time, like, along with that, go ahead and yell out the name of a famous atheist. Do it.
Madeline Murray
Okay, here of the names I heard. There's a mix of, you have like stand-up comedians, right? The George Carlin, the Bill Maher's, who their humor comes from picking out the hypocrisies of religion. I happen to like their bits, but like, that's what they do, right? They're picking on religion. If you're a devout religious person, you may not be a fan. If you're talking about the activists like Madeline Murray O'Hare, obviously, religious people may not be fans. Even the authors, Richard Dawkins and all of them, for better or for worse, even from an atheist perspective, but like, their whole thing of their books, at least their famous books about atheism, is by the time you're done with this book, I want you not to be religious anymore. So like, almost by definition, if you are a famous atheist in public life, you're antagonistic to religion almost by definition. Are you with me there?
Absolutely.
But being an atheist in politics, this is probably, as far as I can tell, and I think I heard Daniel Radcliffe. Even Daniel Radcliffe, I would think, if you know him, it's not, atheism is a small priority on his list of things he talks about, right? But being a politician, this may be the highest profile position anyone can have, where if you are something, whether it's LGBTQ, or you are African American, or an Indian American, what have you, or an atheist, this may be the highest profile place where you could see an atheist whose job it is not to trash religion or promote atheism. So, like, if your representative is an atheist, this is a chance for religious people to see an atheist in a position of power whose job it is, it's not their job to say you're wrong about this and that. And that goes a long way to changing that stigma against atheists. Because, like, hey, when you see someone who's your representative, and you're like, oh, that person who's trans, but who is my representative, and they do a good job of being my representative, that's a big deal. Danica Rome, the person from Virginia, the transgender, I think she's a state rep, who won in Virginia, she made it clear, yes, I'm transgender, but when I'm out trying to campaign and I'm trying to get votes, the thing I am talking about are the potholes on my streets, because that's what people want fixed. And by focusing on that stuff, let everyone else talk about the other stuff. But she's making a case for why this is not a big deal. Stop thinking of me as only transgender. And that goes a long way to taking away that stigma. So this is what I want to get to. It's not that I need atheists in politics, but it would make a big difference in terms of what it means for all of us who are atheists. So that's why I want to talk about this. And the title comes from this cover. This was written by an author named Wendy Kaminer. This is a magazine cover for the New Republic from 1996. And she was writing, so this is the election year, Bill Clinton's running for a second term. She wrote this article saying the last taboo. I know it's hard to see the subtitle there, but it says, politicians keep saying we should inject more religion into our public life, but what we really need is a healthy dose of atheism. And let me just share with you a couple of the things she said in this. It's going, all right. Atheists generate about as much sympathy as pedophiles. When politicians proclaim their belief in God, regardless of their religion, they are signaling their trustworthiness. And by declaring your belief, you imply that an omnipotent, omniscient, and benign force is the source of your values and ideas. And she's saying this is what we're up against, and this is why politicians are religious. Now, I will take issue with the whole idea that atheism is not the last taboo in politics. She wrote this in 96. We did not have a black president then. We didn't have a female running as a major party candidate. So, like, really, atheism was not even the last taboo then. It's not the last taboo now. Literally, that's a weird thing to say. But her point is, it's really hard to be an atheist running for public office because of all of these things. And to some extent, she's right about all of that. You may have seen a map like this. There are literally 7 states right now where their state constitutions still include lines that say atheists, people who don't believe in a higher power, cannot hold public office in this state. Those are the red states here. The green states are one where they just frown upon you if you're an atheist. But the red ones literally say you can't hold office if you're an atheist. Now, those are unenforceable laws, like the Constitution overrides their bigotry, but they're still in the books. Like if you read their constitutions, they are still there. In order to hold office, you've got to believe in God. You may have heard of this guy, Herb Silverman. Herb's awesome if you haven't heard of him yet. He's a professor in South Carolina. His state is one of the 7 that says an atheist can't hold office, elected office. And he was like, how do we change this? And a lawyer said, really, the legislature's not going to do it. It's too, even for something that isn't enforceable, politicians are not going out of their way to get rid of like the thing that says you should believe in a higher power. He's like, the other way to do it is you need an atheist to hold that public office, and then they would like be forced to do it. So he ran for governor In 1990, his campaign slogan was, "I'm the candidate without a prayer." And you're not going to believe this, he lost in South Carolina. Who knew? And because he lost, but by running, he was able to get that issue out there, but it didn't change the law. So then he applied to be a notary public, and his was the only application rejected out of hundreds. That one he sued over, and that one he won. So like, in terms of enforcement, they really can't do much of anything. But like, this stuff, it has an impact. It's kind of nice when you see someone who, wears t-shirts like "Smile, there is no hell," doing this sort of stuff. So, okay, let's talk about how this plays in. He ran in 1990. Let's talk about what's happened since. Like, since 1996, when Wendy Kaminer wrote that article, let's cut to 10 years later, because 2006, Sam Harris had published The End of Faith, The God Delusion had come out. If you go to the 2008 elections, you would think, okay, this is when the new atheism was kind of a thing. Maybe things have gotten a little better. Maybe we see more atheists in public life. But I want to show you this. Here's the setup. In North Carolina that year, in 2008, there was this woman, Kay Hagan, who was running for Senate from North Carolina. And all the stuff about Obamacare passing that happened because there were 60 senators, at least who were voting for that thing. So you needed all these senators down the line. But she was running in a tough race because she was up against Elizabeth Dole, Bob Dole's wife. She was the sitting senator from North Carolina. So they were running in 2008 for that Senate seat. Kind of cool to see two women running for that seat. You didn't see that very often. But Elizabeth Dole has experience. She's a political legend, right? That family name. Kay Hagan was a state representative running for that seat. And at one point, Kay Hagan went to a fundraiser at the house of a donor, who had given money to atheist groups. This was not some atheist party, but the guy hosting her fundraiser had given money to atheist organizations. That was pretty well known. He wasn't hiding it or anything. But I want to show you the attack ad that Elizabeth Dole's campaign played against Kay Hagan that year. And I hope the sound works, but you'll get the gist of it either way.
I'm Elizabeth Dole, and I approve this message. A leader of the Godless Americans PAC recently held a secret fundraiser in Kay Hagan's honor.
There is no God to rely on. There was no Jesus.
We'll take it under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. You're down with that. We're down with that. In God we trust. You're going to whip that out the money? Yeah, we would.
Godless Americans in Kay Hagan. She hid from cameras, took godless money. What did Hagan promise in return?
What did she promise? What do we want? What do they think she was gonna do for us? Those stamps would be on every dollar bill. Here's the cool thing. I think that ad actually backfired on Elizabeth Dole because it was so egregious, and it had nothing to do with how dare you defame atheists. No one had a problem with that. But they're but she's not an atheist, and none of that had anything to do with her. And those had all of those sound bites had nothing to do with, she's religious, what are you doing? So actually, Kay Hagan ended up winning that race. For 6 years, and then she was beaten by Tom Tillis, who was the current senator from there. But he's up in 2020, who knows? But the point is, it didn't hurt her, that's a good thing. But the fact that this sort of attack ad is used against them, because as soon as some campaigns you're connected to atheists, we can use that against you. And it had nothing to do with anything Hagan actually said, or did, or promised. She promised nothing to us. But that's the sort of thing that happens, and that wasn't that long ago. It was a decade ago. So here's the question, what has happened since that time? Has anything gotten better? Because, even the new atheism stuff rose, it's not really a thing anymore, but there are more atheists in public life, and certainly, maybe you've heard of those numbers, what percentage of Americans have no organized religion, or no religious beliefs. It's 30%, 40%, depending. So if all those numbers are going up, away from organized religion, you would think that sort of thing would be less of an issue. And this is where I want to go back to that Wendy Kaminer question. Is atheism the last taboo in politics? I think she's right when it comes to Congress, and I'm going to show you why that's the case, but I think she gets it wrong, not her fault, it's been several years. I think we can answer no when it comes to state level representatives. So let me show you what I mean. In 2006, so again, God Delusion time, Sam Harris time, in 2006, I was working with a group called the Secular Coalition for America. It's a lobbying group in DC. They fight for church-state separation. They literally lobby on Capitol Hill for reason-based policy, separation of church and state. Cool. In 2006, we were all sitting around there and we were wondering, who is the highest ranked elected atheist in public office? Can anybody name the highest ranking public official who is open about their atheism? And honestly, we were coming up relatively empty. We didn't think there was anybody in Congress who was open about their atheism. I mean, maybe you know some, maybe we have some connections. We're like, there are some people who are like, nah, I think I know someone in Congress who is an atheist, but they don't say it out loud. But then that doesn't count. So it's like, are any of these people open? Well, okay, if not in Congress, what about at the state level? And we couldn't think of anybody with one exception to that, I'll tell you in a second. And then we decided, like, the only name that came up was this guy. He looked familiar to some of you. Yeah. This guy's name is Ernie Chambers. He is a state senator in Nebraska. And Nebraska is the weird state where they don't have a House and a Senate. They just have one unicameral legislature. He's been there for like 40-some years. Like, he's a living legend in Nebraska. He's always in a safe district. Like, no one's going to vote this guy out of office. He got term limited out one year, like recently, and then like a couple of years passed and he's like, I'm running again, and then he's back in. He's well known. A few years ago, he's been fighting for decades, literally, to get the death penalty repealed. And finally, a couple of years ago, he had enough votes to override a Republican governor's veto, and they repealed the death penalty, but the conservatives were like, we're going to get enough signatures to put this on the ballot in 2016. And the day Trump won, they also overrode the repeal, so the death penalty's back in Nebraska. But he's fighting again to get it repealed again. But that's Ernie Chambers for you. Here's the thing, Ernie Chambers is really outspoken about church-state separation. And in like 1980, they had a state chaplain, a state-funded chaplain, deliver invocations at the beginning of their legislative sessions. And so he's like, we shouldn't be having that. And he filed a lawsuit to stop the state-funded chaplain from giving invocations. Case went all the way to the Supreme Court. He lost. That was the justification for the Grease v. Galloway case. They're like, well, you lost earlier. We said invocations were okay. So Grease v. Galloway, that invocations are fine. That case was called Marsh v. Chambers. That's Chambers right there. So this guy's fought for church-state separation. Isn't he an atheist? Except he doesn't use that word. He hates that word. If you ask him, are you an atheist? He's like, that word means nothing to me. Because he says, that doesn't tell you what I'm for, so I don't use the word atheist. It's like, okay, you don't count, I guess, on our list. By the way, little side note, in 2007, Ernie Chambers filed a lawsuit against God. And if you read the nature of the cause, this action seeks a permanent injunction ordering the defendant to cease certain harmful activities and the making of terroristic threats. Was thrown out by the judge because God could not be summoned. And they didn't have an address to send the decision. Whatever. But then, again, Ernie Chambers, very idiosyncratic, but he doesn't call himself an atheist. So at the Secular Coalition, we're like, there's got to be somebody out there who's an open atheist and isn't afraid of the label, right? So we actually ran a contest. This was the brainchild of a lawyer named David Neosi, who is awesome. He's written a couple books about atheism and politics. He's wonderful. But the title of this thing is like the second, and yes, that's a horrible banner screenshot there. Like photoshopping is really bad in 2006. The Secular Coalition for America find an atheist, humanist, freethinker elected official contest. We ran a contest. We will give you $1,000 if you can tell us the name of the highest elected atheist, whatever, that you know, and if that person confirms to us that they're an atheist. We are not outing anyone against their will here. And so we figured, okay, worst case scenario, the highest person in America is like the local dog catcher, which proves a point about how atheists are unelectable. Hopefully that's right. How atheists are unelectable. Best case scenario, maybe Dick Cheney's a secret atheist and no one knew, and he'll say yes to us, which I don't know if that's a good thing, but there you go. And it turned out a couple of people said, my congressman is an atheist, but like, and he doesn't seem like he's afraid of it. And we're like, really? So we reached out to that congressperson and with a questionnaire saying like, what label do you use? Do you believe in a higher power? And he said, I call myself a Unitarian, but I don't believe in a supreme being. And we're like, can we say that out loud on your behalf? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So in 2007, Pete Stark, this representative from California, became the first non-theist. That's the word they were all okay with. Non-theist in Congress, as far as we knew, and that was a big deal. And what was really neat is he said, he was actually surprised, he got a lot of positive feedback for that. Because people were so happy to see an atheist, essentially, in office. And he didn't get any real pushback. No one was like, oh my God, I'm never going to vote for you again. He didn't really seem to get that reaction. It wasn't a big deal. And by the way, this guy is not a nobody. At the time, he was on the House Ways and Means Committee. He was also on the chair of the Health Subcommittee. Like, he's not a nobody. He was a pretty high-ranking Democrat. So, neat. But that's one person out of 538. That's where we're at in terms of atheists in public life. And one more little tangent for you. If you are liberal, you may have seen this guy on television. That's Eric Swalwell. He's on the House Judiciary Committee, House Intelligence Committee. He talks on TV about all the Mueller stuff. He's also one of the few Democrats who goes on Fox News all the time to talk about the Mueller stuff. He's awesome. I love this guy. I like seeing him when he's on TV. He's the guy who ran against Pete Stark in 2012. And when he did, what do you think he used in the primary? He used the atheist stuff against Pete Stark. If you look at Eric Swalwell's website, press release, do we trust Pete Stark to represent our views? Like, what are you doing, Swalwell? This is actually what he said in that post. The 15th district. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back this up for a second. Can you see that? Okay. Yeah. There was a vote in Congress, I think on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, to reinstate "In God We Trust" as our national motto. And it was like 398 to 9. So of course it passed. Pete Stark was one of the 9. And this comment, like, the 15th district deserves a member of Congress in touch with its people, blah, 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 and who can honor our national motto. Like, dude, what are you doing? I like you now, but seriously, what are you doing? Because it's an easy thing to use against an atheist politician. And Eric Swalwell won that race. He won the primary, and then he won the race in 2012. I would say, Pete Stark did not lose because he was an atheist. He lost because Swalwell ran a really good campaign. He was a young progressive guy. Pete Stark's an older, kind of moderate guy. So, like, I can see why Swalwell won. But again, he used the atheism against Pete Stark. So now we're down to 0 out of 538. But 2012 also saw the election of this woman, Kirsten Sinema from Arizona. And from everything I heard, people who had worked with her, they were like, she's an atheist too. Like, she said as much to us in private or something. Or she's been to, there was a secular coalition of Arizona that was very active. She supported them, went to their events, whatever. She ran for Congress in 2012, and by that time, like, when she won the primary, and it's Arizona, these are not easy races. When she won the primary, and she had a legit chance of getting elected, all of a sudden it seemed like her campaign wanted nothing to do with the A word, right? And she won the race in 2012. She got elected to Congress, and I saw headlines that said things like, Congress just elected a bisexual atheist to Congress. And how cool is that? And her campaign was very quick to say, she's not an atheist. Come on. So I actually wrote the campaign staff, and I'm like, they didn't come out and say it, they just used coded language. I'm like, is she an atheist or what? And they actually wrote back, And here's what they said. She believes the terms non-theist, atheist, or non-believer are not befitting of her life's work or personal character. You could have just said no. Like, why do you have to trash us in the process? But it's like, all right, she wants nothing to do with us. Fine. Like, she's fine when it comes to politics. In terms of if you're progressive and those values, but like she wants nothing to do with us. Though, when she did get sworn in that year, and John Boehner, Speaker of the House, like does the swearing in, she's swearing in on a copy of the Constitution. That's kind of neat. And then, she ran for Senate last year, and she won her Senate race against Martha McSally in Arizona, and that was not an easy race either. And when she got sworn in, Mike Pence is doing the swearing in. She's swearing in on a stack of law books. So that's kind of neat. The Pew Research Center does this really neat rundown every 2 years where they're like, the new Congress just got inaugurated. What are their religious beliefs? And they do just a breakdown of all of Congress. I know this is hard to read, but if you look down on this list, there's one member of Congress, this is now, who is unaffiliated. That's the official label on their survey, unaffiliated. That's Kirsten Sinema. She won't say atheist, but she will say she's unaffiliated. Take that as you will. There are like another 10 who refuse to answer the question for philosophical reasons, personal reasons, whatever. 0 people on this list say atheist. And we'll talk, there's a little nuance to that, we'll talk about it. So, okay, again, we're getting to the point where this taboo thing is still intact. Like, no one wants to say they're an open atheist in Congress. What about when you leave Congress? Maybe then you could say you're an atheist. And Barney Frank did that. This guy is famously progressive and openly gay, and he's not afraid to talk about that stuff. He left Congress, and then this is a clip I want to show you from Real Time with Bill Maher. This is after he's out of Congress. And the Senate seat had opened up in his state. He was not chosen to be the senator. The governor appointed it. He was not chosen. So this is what they're talking about.
You know, you were in a fairly safe district. You were not one of those Congress people who have to worry about every little thing. You could come on this show and sit next to a pot-smoking atheist and it wouldn't bother you at all. Which pot-smoking atheist were you talking about? Oh, you are the greatest.
I regret I had asked my governor to appoint me to it.
Yes,
Instead,
I
he
agree with
decided
that.
not to. And I was looking forward to having my husband Jim hold the Constitution, not the Bible, and affirm, not swear, that I was going to be a wonderful senator.
So, okay, he said he's an atheist, right? That's what I heard. Did you hear that too? So, like, people's like, okay, Barney Frank was an atheist, he just didn't say it when he, pot-smoking atheist, but yeah. But he just didn't say it when he was in Congress. Then Barney Frank came out with a memoir the next year, and he talked about that incident. The media reached the conclusion that I had come out as an atheist. In fact, I am not an atheist. Like, Barney Frank, come on! If you're not an atheist, who is? And he actually, the reason when he elaborated, he said, I'm Jewish, and while I'm a secular Jew, I feel like kind of saying I don't want to be identified as a Jew comes off as anti-Semitic to some people, and I don't want to insinuate that. So that's why he didn't use the label, even if he didn't believe in a higher power. But come on! You, Barney Frank, you're afraid of the taboo too? Okay, so I thought things were going to get a little better a couple years ago, because there was another option. Jamie Raskin, this congressman, state senator from, state rep, from Maryland, he was running for Congress, and these were the headlines, because he won the primary in 2016. Congress is likely to get its only openly atheist member in November. And this made sense. Like, this guy was famous years before he became a state legislator, because when they were debating same-sex marriage in Maryland, he was a professor at the time, and he was a speaker in front of the state representatives, and he actually said to one of the Republican legislators, you put your hand on the Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution. You did not put your hand on the Constitution and swore to uphold the Bible. Like, this guy's good. And so, of course, you're thinking, all right, finally, we're going to get an atheist in Congress. But then he won the primary in Maryland, so he was almost a shoo-in to be in Congress. And of course, then the articles came out, the man billed as the first atheist who could be bound for Congress isn't actually an atheist. He took the Barney Frank route. He said, I'm Jewish, like, I don't want to seem anti-Semitic. I'm a humanist with a lowercase h. All of those, like, come on, man, nobody. So that's why on the Pew list of Congress people, like, there's the one unaffiliated Kirsten Sinema. Raskin isn't on that list. He's listed as Jewish. Bernie Sanders, who doesn't really talk about religion, is listed as Jewish. Like, this is where we get nobody from. So, are you with me here that like this stigma in Congress is pretty real here? In 2012, Gallup does this poll every presidential election year where they ask you, it's okay if you can't see this right now. They ask you, would you vote for somebody of your political party if that person were a blank? Sorry. If that person were a blank. And they say, would you vote for somebody if that person was a woman? But they agreed with your politics. And like, if you look at the list, would you vote for someone who's black? Yeah, 96% of people say, yeah, that's not a deal breaker, that's fine. If I agree with their politics, it's fine. What about if they're a woman? Yeah, 95% say it's fine. Where do atheists appear on this list? We're dead last. This is 2012, and this was actually exciting because the number is 54% of people said they would vote for an atheist. And we crossed the 50% mark. That was a big deal at the time. This is just another depiction of the exact same thing. There's us, there's the 54%. Yeah. And if you go backwards in time there was a point where we were not last, and that was like in the late 70s when they did this poll, because guess who was below us in the least likable? It was gay and lesbian. Yeah, Muslims they didn't even ask about, because why would you in the 70s? They're not getting into Congress, right? That's the implication. So they only started asking about Muslim, like, more recently. But okay, so this is where we're at with, like, presidency and Congress. Like, if you are an open atheist, even the ones who are so progressive, so liberal, even they don't want to say the word. They're so afraid of what that's going to imply or suggest or whatever. So, now here's what's happening, though, at the state level. Because at the state level, this stuff starts to change. And this is where it gets really neat. So, in 2014, this guy runs for state... he ran for Congress. I'm sorry, I'm going to do one more Congress one. He ran for Congress. His name is James Woods. He ran for Congress in Arizona. And he ran in a really, really conservative district. And he's thinking... This is one of those races where progressives, Democrats, they don't even run a candidate here. No one runs in the primary because you know you're gonna lose. That's what always happens. So he's like, screw that, I'm gonna run, and I'm not gonna hide away, I'm not gonna hide who I am. Like, cause what, I'm gonna lose no matter what I do, so why am I gonna hide it? So he's very open about his atheism. He's also blind, and he's wanted to make a platform that was all about disability rights. And he's like, I want to talk about this because no other candidate can talk about this from experience. I can. So he ran this campaign where he's like, here's who I am, here's what I stand for. He gets to do the debates. He gets to get profiled in the local media. And in all of that stuff, he is talking about his values. And that's like, it's not free publicity, but it is publicity about the values that matter to him. And here's what's really cool. When you know you're the underdog in a race like that, you don't hold back. So one time he got a questionnaire from an anti-abortion group. They're like, what's your position on abortion? We asked this of all the candidates. He didn't just respond and say, I am pro-choice. He sent back a long explanation of why he's pro-choice, something that they could also post on social media, right? Because that's smart to do. And he also made branded condoms to attach to that questionnaire. Prevent abortion, or woods. But like, here's a guy who spoiler, he lost the race. But he knew that. So why hold back? You can say it, and you know what? He didn't lose because he was an atheist. He lost because he's a Democrat in that area. So like, what the hell are you holding back for at that point? But, okay, so when you get to the state level though, this stuff makes a difference, because some state level people, where it's like very local, you don't have to do a huge district, you have a much more controlled area that you're representing. Now it's a little easier because you know your district and you know if they're going to make a big deal about your atheism. So here's an example of a state legislator. His name is Juan Mendez. He's also from Arizona. He's like, yeah, well, he's a state rep. He's thinking, I'm not going to hide my atheism. But like, where do you deploy that? And so he's in the state legislature. He decides to do one of the invocations, because that's how they open their legislative sessions. So let me play you the invocation, he said. This is from 2013.
Most prayers in this room begin with a request to bow your heads.
I'm sorry, it's
I'd
off.
like to ask that you not bow your heads. I'd like to ask you take a moment to look around the room at all the men and women here in this moment sharing this extraordinary experience of being alive and dedicating ourselves to the lives of the people of our state. This is a room in which there are many challenging debates, many moments of tension, of ideological division, of frustration. But there is also a room where, as my secular humanist tradition stress, by the very fact of being human, we have much more in common than we have differences. True. We share the same spectrum of potential for care, for compassion, for fear, for joy, for love. Carl Sagan once wrote, "For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love." There is in the political process much to bear. In this room, let us cherish and celebrate our shared humanness, our shared capacity for reason and compassion, our shared love for the people of our state, for our Constitution, and for our democracy. And let us root our policy-making process in these values that are relevant to all Arizonans, regardless of religious belief or non-belief. In gratitude and in love, in reason and in compassion, let us work together for a better Arizona.
Wow.
Cool. The day after he did that, when they did their invocation, a Republican colleague of his not only denounced this offensive invocation, he gave a second Christian invocation to, I guess, karmically undo the damage he had done. But here's the thing, once he came out, and that was kind of his public, I mean, if you knew him, you knew he was an atheist, but the public didn't know, but they wrote about the invocation. Once that happened, he's like, he got so much good feedback from people who were so happy to hear what he said. He's like, oh, I should talk about this more often when I get the chance to, and it's appropriate. He doesn't want to alienate his religious constituents, of course, but he's like, oh, well, when I get a chance, I'm not going to shy away from it. And a couple of years ago, he said, I want to run for the state senate. Harder position to get, but they know me. They know my policies in this community, and they know I'm good for them. So he ran for state senate, and this time, the atheism didn't hurt him. He did get elected to the state senate. He is a state senator now. So that's awesome. Yeah, by all means. And that means his House seat was open. Who runs for that House seat? Turns out to be this woman. Her name is Athena Salman. She's also an atheist. And she got elected, and when she got a chance to do an invocation, she also used the opportunity just like he did. And then, I want to show you, she did an invocation again 2 weeks ago. Here's what she said 2 weeks ago.
Take a moment to reflect on the wonders of the universe. Bask in the awe and magnificence of the diversity of nature. Look upon the soaring mountains, the vast seas, the cloud-studded azure skies. Ponder how living beings became so immensely diverse on our life-giving planet. How integrated and interdependent is all life meshed on our wondrous earth. Can we truly fathom the depth of the intricacies required to produce and sustain living beings such as animals, plants, microbes, the engines that support the survival of such diverse life forms on an incredibly insignificant planet, in an insignificant galaxy, in an insignificant...
Very inspiring.
...immense universe that may possibly be a single speck floating in a sea of universes. The wonders of nature dwells deep in the hearts and minds of all people living on this wondrous rock we call Earth, as it makes its endless journey around a life-giving star we call soul. No matter what we may call it, we give thanks to the awe-inspiring power of nature itself.
Cool. What do you think happened after she spoke? right after she was done, a Republican colleague, this is the part of the legislative day where they introduce whatever guests they bring in to witness the day's session. So one of her colleagues said, I would like to introduce my guest here, and let's play that.
Representative Kavanaugh. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to a point of personal privilege, introduction of guests to the gallery. Please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to introduce my guest, God.
Where is he?
He is everywhere. And the same God who, by the way, created nature, which supportively created this tiny speck of a planet in which this tiny speck of legislature lives. Thank you.
Dude, come on. And by the way, the next day, because Athena Salman doesn't take shit from people, the next day, she denounced his remarks and basically point blank on the record was like, do you ever do that when it's a Christian person speaking, where you like passive aggressively do this sort of thing? But again, this was the second time she's done an invocation, and the second time they've said something afterwards. Like, in Arizona, it's a big thing. But the fact is, like, people like her because she fights back, she's fighting for her values, and her values are like the values progressives want to see. Like, I have no doubt, this is pure speculation on my part, if they ever elect, like, an atheist for Congress from Arizona, it'll be one of them, because people know them for their legislation and their policies, and this is a sideshow, but it is one they take seriously. So, just FYI. Okay, going back to Congress for a second. So at the moment, you would think we have 0 members in Congress who are not religious. But then, this is where, like, after you see what happened in 2018 with those midterms, and like the blue wave that occurred then, and leading into it, it turns out that, like, being an atheist, not really as bad for you as it seems other issues are. Like, religion is no longer the big problem as much as what are your politics? Where do you stand on these particular issues? That might be a big issue of debate. But the fact that you're an atheist now is like a good time to get in, right? Because like there's too much other stuff happening no one's going to pay attention to. And so one person actually did that. Congressman Jared Huffman from California, he actually said publicly, with the help of the Secular Coalition for America, he said, I am not religious. I am a lowercase h humanist, but I don't believe in a higher power. He does not say he's an atheist, because they never say they're atheists. And actually, this is what bothered me. When they asked him, like, why are you not an atheist? His exact quote, I'm not hostile to religion, and I'm not judging other people's religious views. Come on, man. But okay, he's a humanist. So going back to that Pew study where they were like, what are the members of Congress and their religious affiliations? I'm scanning this, looking for humanist. It's not there. When you go to the unaffiliated, it's still only Kirsten Sinema. Like, where are you, Huffman? This happened after you came out. And his answer from his staff was, he didn't fill out the survey. Like, you have one job for me. Come on, man. But, give him credit for this. He spearheaded the creation of a Congressional Freethought caucus. And he actually has 10 members of Congress who are members of this caucus, and their whole shtick is, we fight for church-state separation and reason-based policy, and all of us are very supportive of those values. 0 of those 10 are atheists. But you see Jared Huffman on that list, you see Jamie Raskin on that list. I don't know why you don't see Kirsten Sinema on that list. But like, there is a Congressional Prayer Caucus, and it's huge. And this is kind of a way to counter that. They're not doing it with money, they're not doing it with numbers, but it's a start. Like, this is now set. They have this. And it's only going to get added to in coming years, I would hope. So that's nice. And actually, in last year, Gallup ran that poll again. Would you vote for someone in your political party if they were an X, Y, and Z? And this time, if you look at the bottom of the list, that's not us. It says socialist down there. We moved up in the world. Thanks, Bernie Sanders. So we're not the most divisive thing in the country anymore. That number, by the way, what percentage of people would vote for an atheist, all other things considered? It's at 58%. I know that's low still, but I'm going to break that down for you in a little bit. But again, we're not last. Like, being a socialist is more divisive than being an atheist. Like, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is more divisive than Jared Huffman is ever going to be. So, last year, 2018, when the midterms were coming around, and you start realizing there are a handful of state legislators who are openly atheists. And I think there are a bunch more who are non-religious in whatever terminology they use for it. Let's start tracking this. And there was actually a group called the Center for Freethought Equality. It's an arm of the American Humanist Association that said, yeah, we want to track this too. And they actually have a political action committee that does endorsements. And they give money to some candidates. It's legal, it's totally something they can do. But again, like, do you really want an endorsement or money from an atheist group? So like, you know, it's one of those things. But they're tracking this because they've been doing endorsements since 2014. And not many people wanted them at the state or federal level, but some of them did. And so they started keeping track. So we started keeping track of all the candidates who we knew were openly non-religious in some capacity. Now this top group, I know it's hard to see, that's okay. This top group are the ones in Congress, like the members of the Freethought Caucus. Like, they got reelected, fine, cool. None of them are atheists. But then, I'm gonna scroll through this list here, and what I want you to see is, starting from here and downward, those are all candidates who are openly, who won their primaries and they were running for state level office, state house or state senate. They were all out as non-religious, whatever term they used. Red means they didn't win their race, which is the case for just about everybody all the time. And green means they won their race. And watch what happens as you scroll through this list. These are alphabetical by state. I think we're in Mississippi. But the whole point is, don't worry about the blocks of red, there's a ton of green. That's a lot of people. As by my count, there are like 50 state legislators who are openly non-religious. 50. I thought it was like 2. No, there are like 50. They got the endorsement from the Freethought Equality Fund. Some of them got money from them, but all of them were okay to get that endorsement. And all of them were okay with the Freethought Equality Fund saying, you know, Bob Jones identifies as a humanist, or spiritual but not religious, or is religiously unaffiliated. Whatever they felt comfortable saying, go with it. But that's a lot of people. That's huge. And to the point where, here's how cool this list is. I mean, I'm keeping track of this on election night too. And I had one state representative reach out to me. She was running for re-election. Sent me a nasty private comment, like she slid into my DMs on Twitter. She's like, why am I not on your list? I'm an atheist. I'm like, who are you? You are not on my radar at all. And I'm like, so I confirmed, she's from New Hampshire. She was an atheist. And I'm like, are you okay with me saying that? Because I don't want to hurt you if you're not out about this. And she said, look at my Twitter feed. I swear every day, I'm not afraid of the word atheist. All right, cool. There was one piece of legislation earlier this year that I think was from like, whatever state it was pro-science education. It was something like good for church-state separation. And I looked at the sponsor, and the sponsor was someone in green on this list. And I looked at the co-sponsors, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of the people from that state who are in green, who also served as the co-sponsors. And I noted that on my website, like several of these people are open atheists or open non-theists who support this piece of legislation. And I got a message from that sponsor who said, yeah, I used your list to figure out which of my colleagues would co-sponsor this. So once they know they're out there, it's like, you're an atheist, I can talk to you about this. And the thing is, this is 2018. This is, I assume, gonna get bigger by 2020 and so on, right? So that's awesome. This is the Freethought Equality Fund. How many endorsements do they do? This says in 2014, they did 18 endorsements. And they, again, you can endorse everybody for anything. This is at the state or federal level. 18 endorsements, 7 of them won. in 2014. In 2016, 61 endorsements, 44 won. And last year, 2018 elections, 291 and 68. Like, again, don't worry about how the disparity between the lines, because you want to endorse as many people as you can. The more you have in the race, the more people are going to win. But that means there's like 68 people who got a nod from the FEF who won their races in some capacity or another, which is amazing. Okay, so with that in mind, let's do some takeaways from all this, and I'll wrap it up here. What do we learn from all of this stuff? Here's what I can gather from all this. One of the takeaways is if you are running for office as an atheist, you can win, but you can't let atheism define you.
Of course not.
If anyone only knows you as an atheist, you're not going to win the race. But all the people I'm talking about are known for their progressive politics, or they're known for certain other issues that they tackle. And atheism just happens to be one of many things that they are open about. And that's why it's not a big deal for them. This is an example of what I'm talking about. This is Megan Hunt. She ran for state senate in Nebraska, the state where there is no state house, it's just the Senate, like Ernie Chambers area. She ran for state senate in Nebraska last year, and because she won, because she won the primary or however it works there, she's on the ballot, so local newspapers are running profiles of the candidates, right? And in a profile about her, and they did a little bio sidebar on the left there, and it just says, faith, atheist. Like, she just said it. Here's us like deliberating over when's the proper time to do it. She just goes out and does it. And then that's the only mention of it. In the entire, like the reporter was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And they just talked about other stuff. And I asked her, because I follow her and I feel like she's the one person in politics at the state level who is my age and shares a lot of my politics. So like watching her is like, oh, that's what I would love to do if I were in your position. It's really cool because she's doing it. And I asked her, I'm like, do you have any advice for other atheists who are running for office? And I want to quote what she said. And because she said very clearly, take the air out of the balloon. Don't censure the issue. Basically, don't let anyone make a big deal about it. Right. And if anyone asks you about it, and this is politics 101, you pivot, right? Like if they want to talk about your religion, you just say, yeah, I'm an atheist, and here's why I care about church-state separation, and here's why I'm protecting the religious liberties of everybody. That's what you do, and like then they can't make atheism an issue, right? And she never made it an issue in her campaign. She just happens to be an atheist, and she's one of the few who uses that word, right? So that's cool. The other one is like, don't run away. Don't run away from the word. If you are an atheist, and this is becoming easier to do now, you don't have to run away from it, even if you're in a really red district. And here's what I'm talking about. This woman's name is Gail Jordan. She is an atheist activist. She was executive director of a group called Recovering from Religion. That's the name. Like, this is what she does. She's passionate about politics. And in 2016, she ran for a state senate seat in a deep red part of Tennessee. Like, again, this is the James Woods issue where it's like, you're not gonna win. But she ran, and she tried to not talk about atheism. She tried to make sure people did not define her with that word. And like, to that end, it worked. She lost, but she lost because she was a Democrat, not because she was an atheist who happened to be a Democrat. And she got 26% of the votes in 2016. Then that seat opened up in 2017. Like maybe Trump told the Republican to do something. That seat opened up, they had to have a special election. She said, I'm gonna run again, which is easy to do when no one else is running as a Democrat in that area. She ran again, and this time, she's like, screw it. Like, I'm not hiding the fact that I'm an atheist. And so what did the opposition do? Totally use that against her. Of course they would. These were some of the flyers they sent out. Gail Jordan has some kooky liberal ideas. I'm reading the third bullet point here. Gail Jordan describes herself as a hippie, liberal, atheist activist. My favorite one, they quote in her own words, God is such a bad God. The sacrifice of Jesus is such a bad concept. And even if it were true, I wouldn't want to follow it. which I'm sure is something she said in a talk somewhere sometime. But look at the bottom one. Doing my part to destroy the fabric of American society. And part of me saw that, I'm like, in what context would anybody ever say that? Here's the answer. The answer is she officiated a same-sex wedding, and on Facebook there's a picture of the happy couple with her in like a group hug, and she sarcastically puts on Facebook, doing my part to destroy the fabric of American society, because of course she's not doing that. But they used it against her. But they must have been scared of her, because even the lieutenant governor of Tennessee got involved. In my 40 plus years in politics, I've seen few candidates as dangerous as Gail Jordan. Like, geez, dude. We need to reject her assault on faith and our Tennessee values. Guess how she did in that race? She still lost. However, I just want to point out, look at the percentage there. That's actually higher than she got in 2016. And I know it's a special election and it's a different turnout, it's a lower turnout. As a statistician, math person, like, it's not apples to apples. But the fact is that her atheism, which was front and center in the second race, did not hurt her. Not in deep red Tennessee, where they were going to be against her for a lot of reasons. Like the atheism thing, it wouldn't have made a difference. So if you're in a red district, be out about your atheism, because you got to give progressives something to support. And if you're in a really blue district and you won the primary, like, you don't have to shy away from it. You just don't have to make a big deal about it. You don't have to run away from the word necessary. Now, if you're in a close race in a district that could go either way, I would probably advise you try to not talk about it as much as possible. But there are cases when it's okay. Let's talk about this partisan thing. We are virtually non-existent in the GOP. That spreadsheet I showed you with all the green lines and stuff of the people who got elected, 0 of them are Republicans. So why is that? Make your own theories here. But the thing is, like, the GOP on paper would seem like, well, if you're a conservative and you support conservative values, you're one of us. In practice, it seems like you got to be a certain brand of evangelical Christian now, otherwise you're not going to get their support. But it's not that in atheists I have met, it's not that I've only run into Democrats. Like, if you look at the 2016 presidential race, I think like 76% of non-religious people voted for Hillary Clinton. The rest voted for Trump. There's atheists in that mix. There is a group called Republican Atheists. It's like 3 people. I don't know what they do. But it exists. There is a number of groups for anti-abortion atheists. Like, those people, Robert Price has written a couple of books about atheism. He is a staunch Trump supporter. Like, those people are out there. But the fact is the party doesn't really seem to reach out much. But I will tell you, in my research over the past few years, I found one openly atheist Republican. And the reason I found him is because a letter to the editor that was in his local paper, I'm not going to read all of this, I know it's a big block of text, but he was responding to the demographic changes and people are running away from organized religion. And he wrote in, it's difficult and, to be frank, rather foolish to hold on to archaic beliefs that deny reality. I don't see the value of belief systems that consistently devalue others by telling them they're bad people for not believing the same things or having some sort of moral superiority. People are rejecting religion because it does not coalesce with our modern times. And then I saw who wrote this? And he's a state rep. And I'm like, you're not on my list, who are you? And it said he's a Republican. And I reached out to the guy, I'm like, let me get this straight. Like, you are a Republican, Wikipedia is not wrong about this. He's like, yeah, I'm a Republican. And you're an atheist, right? He's like, yeah. And you use the word atheist. Yeah. I'm like, do you know what a unicorn you are? Can I say this out loud that you're an atheist? He's like, yeah, I'm not afraid of, like, I didn't realize this was a thing anyone cared about. I'm like, oh my God. So, this guy, Brandon Finney is his name, from New Hampshire. He did come out. And then, this was in like early 2017. Later in the year, I think he got fed up with what his party was doing legislatively, politically. He's like, you know what, I gotta leave this party. He officially became a libertarian, and he was still in the state house. And then last year in the elections, because he's a third-party candidate now, he totally lost the race. So we are down to 0 Republicans that I know of who are open atheists. Like it wasn't even close. So for now, the GOP wants nothing to do with us, and election-wise, there's none that I know of. But it's not out of the question. I would also say the demographics favor us in terms of atheists in office. And that Gallup survey from before the 2016 election, when they said 58% of people would vote for an atheist, if you break it down by age, check this out. On the far right there, if you're 65 or older, only like 48% of people say they're okay voting for an atheist. But on the far left, where it's under 30, 75% say we're fine with an atheist. Like, it's getting to the point where it's like, yeah, that is not the deal breaker in terms of whether or not we support you. So that's in our favor there. That's good. Here's another takeaway from this. We as a people don't vote our weight. Like, this is from a group called PRRI. The blue lines show the rise of the nuns, the non-religious, and you can see we're growing in terms of non-religious Americans. The green lines represent what percentage of us vote. And you can see even as we're getting to like 25% of the population, we're still like 12% of the voting public. It's different for white evangelical Christians. They vote above their weight. Like they're a shrinking part of the American demographic, religiously speaking, but they all vote. We do not all vote. And again, it's harder. Like, you know these things. We don't organize. It's herding cats, all that good stuff. Democrats do not reach out to us specifically the way Republicans do with church audiences. There's a lot of reasons for this. But again, we haven't given politicians a reason to consider our issues. So groups like this, groups like the Secular Coalition for America, their whole thing is, no, there's a lot of us out here. We do care very much about certain issues, education, church-state separation, science education, sex education. We want you to take strong progressive stances on these issues. There's no reason they can't do that, but we have to kind of force their hand at this. And we do that by voting and making sure they know we care about this stuff. One last, really quick ones. All the atheists I've mentioned here are really awesome people. That probably won't always be the case. Like, I would love to have so many atheists in public life where I could be like, you don't want to vote for this one. They're really bad on these issues. I know in Florida, the Bible bill in school was sponsored by a Democrat. And it's one of the rare times I'm like, that Democrat needs to lose the next race. I haven't said that yet about an atheist candidate, but I'm sure that day is going to come, but we don't have that luxury yet. This is one, especially for people here, you should run for something, if you can. This is a joke. I coach a public speaking team. We talked about this issue in other capacities. But the thing is, we've talked about state level legislatures, federal, Congress, House, whatever. That's like we're talking a few thousand seats of all the ones I just mentioned, state level, federal level. There are 400,000 elected seats, by one estimate, across the country, and no one pays any attention to any of them. They're like Kardashian babies. There's a ton, no one knows about 90% of them. But that also means if you're talking about what matters at a local level, school boards matter, city councils matter. All of those elected seats don't have the attention and the publicity and the drama that comes with these high-profile races, but they have an impact. And so depending on how much time to put in, some of them are voluntary, some of them are small stipend positions, depending on your family situation, job situation, I know there's a lot that goes into it. But if you can run, you should consider running, because I promise you, and I see this all the time, conservative Christians know that, and they actively encourage their churches, their congregation members, to run for those seats, because that's the way you can influence school boards, and you can do all this stuff. And by the way, this is something that I saw really happen after 2016 from the progressive side. They made it really easy for people to run if you don't have any clue what you're doing. There's a group that wanted people to run for something, and they're called Run for Something, And they walk you through, here's what you need to do if you're running for anything. We will help you with like the specific logistical stuff you need to do. We're not giving you money necessarily, but all the other stuff that you're like, how do I even begin? They'll help you with that. This is just a plug for a group I really think is awesome. There's a group called Get Her Elected, and it's really just one woman who runs this, but her goal is she wants progressive women in politics. So if you're a woman running, you contact her and you say, I don't know how to do Facebook ads, I don't know how to do, I'm not a good public speaker, I need help with a mailing list. And she, like, in the lead up to 2018 elections, she would send out like bi-weekly lists. Here's a bunch of candidates and what they need. And if you, on this mailing list, can help with any of the following, let me know and I will connect you with those people. So I ended up at one point, as Stacey Abrams, the governor, was running for governor of Georgia. Before she was in that race, there was a primary, and there were 2 Democrats running. One of the Democrats running for lieutenant governor, who wasn't her running mate, Stacey Abrams' running mate, but another woman, she posted on this list saying, like, I need help because I have a debate coming up on public speaking skills. And what do I do? Because I did a debate. I'm not happy with my performance. And I ended up getting connected to that woman. We had a long session where we're like, because I'm a public speaking coach at high school, we had this long conversation. Here's what you're doing right. Here's what you're doing wrong. Let's fix this, that. It was awesome. Like, I felt like I was doing some sort of good deed somewhere. And then she lost, but whatever. But like, just the fact that like, that is so cool that they can just help candidates. It doesn't matter if you're running for city council or senate. Like, there's groups, so many groups out there helping you run. And so, encourage you. If you haven't considered it, consider it. And last one, then I'm done. All of you, believe it or not, in Florida, a lot of candidates are going to come through here over the next year. Tons of them. Apparently they want votes in Florida, right? And here's the thing. They are going to have town halls and Q&A sessions in like every big city in Florida when they come in your community. And again, yes, most of them are going to be Democrats and most of them are going to be pretty progressive. But here's what you can do. If you go to those meetings, there's a guy named Justin Scott in Iowa. Iowa, another place where every candidate's coming through, right? So he goes to their meetings, and he will just stand there, like Ted Cruz is standing here running for president in 2016, and he'll just be like, Ted Cruz, my name is whatever, I represent this group, I am an atheist, why should I vote for you? That's a good question. I know what type of answer you're gonna get, you're probably not gonna like his answer, but that's an interesting question to get on the record, because they're never gonna ask it in a debate. And even getting Democrats on the record, what are you going to do to support church-state separation or science education or all these other things that I'm sure a lot of us in the room care about, but they're not necessarily the biggest ticket items on like the Democratic platform. It's not climate change, but it's like science education doesn't get much attention. Ask them about it. Get them on the record. Videotape it so people can share it. All of you can do that. And if you're interested in politics anyway, you probably want to go see them speak anyway if they're in your neck of the woods. Get them on the record on our issues that matter to us. Because none of it is pro-atheism. It's just, what are you going to do for people who care about science, education, church-state separation? Okay, so I will stop there. That's enough of me talking. There's my contact information if you need to get a hold of me. Whatever time you have for questions, I'm game. Let's do it.
Things I want to point out. One, we've got the Freethought Equality Fund pack brochures at the table out front, and we have 2 endorsed candidates in Florida who have won. Jennifer Webb over in Pinellas County and Carlos Guillermo Smith here in the Orlando area. We actually have 2 candidates, at least one of which was endorsed, perhaps both. I'm not going to point them out here. I'll leave that to them to do if they want to announce that they did. I think that would be a great gesture if they felt comfortable doing that. But they haven't necessarily said I'm an atheist or immunist, but they are on our side and they are running as well. So we've got some of those things happening just in the last few years here in the Orlando area. So.
Hi. I have a comment and a question.
Yes. There we go.
So I'm something of a very novice political commentator, but I write a lot. And I'm a trans woman. I'm a lesbian trans woman, which most people won't even admit that that's a thing that exists. I'm an unapologetic feminist. I support democratic socialist policies in a lot of cases, and still the thing that I'm attacked the most for, and the thing that I get the most pushback and usually runs away with the conversation is anytime atheism is brought up.
Yeah.
That is the thing that I'm attacked most on. My question is, your activism, your organization, have you looked into doing a comparison of world leaders in other countries who are openly atheists? Because one of the things that I advocate the most for is a woman president. And in that, I have a list of other countries that have had a woman as their leader.
As far as compiling a list of that stuff, I know I know I have written about various world leaders or mayors of big cities, or not prime minister. There was another one like in Ireland, or like there are people who are at that level and who are not afraid of saying they're an atheist. It's easier to do in certain parts of Europe, especially where religion's just not as big of a thing. I don't know that there's a list, but I know I hear about that. It's certainly like the president of Greece is an atheist, and he mentions that every now and then. He has bigger problems going on to deal with that no one cares about his atheism, but it is interesting to bring up when religion comes into the mix. I think Australia...
Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister of Australia.
Right, and she was open about her atheism too. Right, so talking about it, yes, absolutely. The problem I think that I come across when I do that is, okay, yeah, that works over there, it doesn't necessarily work over here, which is true to some extent, but this is why like someone like Athena Salman, some of those state legislators who are open about it, that might carry a lot more weight with people than the Prime Minister of country XYZ. But it is helpful to point out, like, yeah, they had an atheist leader, everything was fine. If they did something wrong, it was a political problem. It wasn't a religious-based problem. So that is a fair point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Janet. I think that, our best hope is the young people who are very religiously unaffiliated.
Very true.
So how do we get them to vote? Because they're not interested in voting, they don't think it matters, they don't think it makes a difference.
Yeah, the apathetic part of that is hard. I think how you get them interested, as far as anything goes, is, I don't know if we can fix this at all. I think the best way is you get them interested in certain... Can I just yell for now? I think the best way is we talk about certain causes that matter. We talk about certain causes that matter to people, and not necessarily our pet issues, but it's like, you can get them excited about, hey, child separation, you don't like that, here's how we stop it. You want to support LGBTQ rights, good, here's how we stop it. And again, it's young people getting their friends excited about it, and there are plenty of progressive groups that are making it easy to get in touch with the, like, here's how you make sure people are voting, here's how we make it easy to help people drive to the polls, here's how we get early voting, pushing for that stuff. Like, all of that is going to make it easier for them to vote. And when you make it really easy and you can compel them to say, you've got to take this seriously, that will create a change. But that's not an atheist issue. As far as I'm concerned, like, that's a progressive issue in general. Because, like, if they're voting, progressives are winning just about all of these races. So this is something a lot of people are trying to figure out. And again, they did good in 2018. They need to do better by 2020. So, I mean, they're going to figure this out.
Are you running for office?
I am so not running for office. I've spent like 15 years creating an opposition researcher's dream material. And also having 2 babies and stuff. It's Yes?
Hey there, I'm Beth Torres, and I did run for office in 2016. I won my primary. I did not win the general election, but we came close.
Yeah.
And I am a member of the church here, just because they're not deity-based, and they are a social action-based group here, so they were very good in the campaign, helping me out. I will tell you, if you want to run, then run. It was the scariest thing I did, but it was also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And I think the saying is, life begins outside your comfort zone, and there's plenty of people to help you. And you're not going to run necessarily as an atheist on that platform. There's plenty of other things to run on that we all care about. So go for it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie, and I'm pretty involved politically. I follow the bills on the state level, and for quite a while now, and I'm seeing an increase in religious-based legislation in this state.
Yeah.
For instance, a lot of Democrats didn't know who sponsored the Bible bill and who sponsored In God We Trust in every public school last session. So there's this thing like, a Democrat would never do that. Well, yes, they did. So I feel like I'm constantly having to educate people. Even like just because they're a Democrat doesn't mean they're making good choices. So, as well as with public schools, moving our public dollars into voucher programs for religious education. How do we combat that? It's very frustrating because it's getting worse, not better.
I say this with complete bias here, but one of the ways is if you're following the bills and you see something that is egregious, there are a lot of groups that have their focus on whether it's education issues, like the Bible in the class in schools bill.
Yeah.
That affects education groups, that affects church-state separation groups, atheist groups obviously, and make sure you are contacting those groups saying, make sure your entire mailing list knows about this thing that is happening and get on that. I see conservative Christian groups do that when they see a commercial for Target and they get millions of people sign this petition, we're gonna make sure Walmart removes this commercial because it had a gay person in it. But we need to do that when it comes to science education because a lot of those bills go under the radar until it's too late to really do anything about it and to contact legislators and everything. And as someone who tries to follow a lot of the bills, I can't follow everything at the state level. I can barely do it at the congressional level. So contact groups that would have a stake in that thing and let them amplify it for you because it is hard.
Do you ever get pushback like, oh, that'll never happen, it's too far out there, and then it happens?
I've gotten a lot less of that pushback lately because they all know it could happen. Yeah. So this is why it's important to make a huge ruckus about it as early as possible, because then at least it puts the politicians on the defensive. Because if you pass this bill, the following stuff is going to happen. So make sure you answer that when you're debating all this. And that's one of the things, reporters they love that stuff. Because otherwise watching those debates and the hearings are so boring. But if people make a big deal about it, now they have a focus and they can do that. And you can get people in the crowd who are cheering about it or not. That stuff makes a difference. Because sometimes it's so much easier to say, let's just table this for now and not even vote on it. And that's a victory in a lot of cases. But it means getting it out in front of people who need to see it.
Hello, Mr. Mehta.
Hello.
Thanks for your presentation. It's very informative. I wanted to ask you, based on the research you did, most of these progressive atheists getting elected seem to come from places like, for example, Arizona, California. You mentioned Nebraska as well. And did your research reveal anything from people like, say, the Northeast, Upper Midwest? Because I feel like those are very progressive places as well, and there's nothing actually mentioned about, say, New York, Connecticut, Michigan, places like that.
Thank you for the question. I didn't go into them because they would take me forever.
Okay.
But yes, they do exist. Like New Hampshire, where they have a gazillion state reps, they do have a ton of non-religious representatives. Vermont has a number of them. I have not found that the generally progressive states have an excess amount of non-religious elected officials. Okay. You would think, New Hampshire's going to have a gazillion of them, or Vermont's going to have a bunch. No, they don't. They have maybe a couple. But like New Hampshire has like almost a dozen, but they also have like 500 state reps or something crazy. There are some states that have nobody, and some of them you would expect, like I don't think Mississippi has anybody, but there are some generally blue states that don't have anybody either. So that is not necessarily there. But if you're in like a red state, but a blue island in the red state, you could theoretically win those races and be that voice. And being that voice makes a difference when it comes to how people are perceiving this stuff. Like, I'm only saying this because I talked about her. Athena Salman, the woman from Arizona. Arizona is fighting right now to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. That was up for debate in their state. But that state is, I believe, overwhelmingly Republican. They were not going to vote for it. So she made sure she made as big of a stink about it as humanly possible to get it on people's radar and getting people to show up at these hearings and everything, because that's what you do when you're in the minority party. You make sure everyone knows what's happening here. So to get back to your question, yes, there are state reps from a bunch of states. That, if you look for that spreadsheet, it's just Atheists in Public Office 2018. It'll be on my site. I'll make sure it's posted there.
Cool.
But they are all over the place. There's no correlation between these states have a bunch, these have none. So yeah, it's all over the place.
Hi, my name is Byron. My question is not going to seem immediately pragmatic. I wanted to ask you of political people, leaders that you agree with or admire, if you could name a thread that you think unifies them in your mind in how you view that. Would there be a word or a concept that you would say that does that?
They're very open about their thought process. They're humans on like social media. Like one of the people I follow on Twitter who I just adore is Brian Schatz, who's a senator from Hawaii, whose Twitter feed never gets any attention. Or Ocasio-Cortez, everything she tweets becomes like national news. He is not that. But he's very he has a dry sense of humor. And every tweet is like, hey, Trump said this on Twitter. Climate change is real. We need to do something about it. I just like that he feels about these issues the same way I tend to feel about them. And they're very upfront and honest. Yes, this is an insane distraction. This is where our focus needs to be. These are issues that matter more than the stuff that's getting in the media. And yeah, that's a fair, sensible take on this, and I appreciate that. I would imagine if you're one of his constituents, you know how he feels about this stuff, you know he doesn't get distracted. And the politicians that I really like, they're very open about telling you, this is on the docket, this is what I'm fighting for today. Megan Hunt, the one from Nebraska, does an amazing job of saying, this week, I am fighting on these issues. If you care about these particular bills, I need you to show up on these days. But just saying, this is what I'm doing for you, this is how I'm doing it, here's where I stand on this, and she's not afraid to call out her colleagues who are wrong about it. And just that openness, and here's where I stand. If you're gonna vote me out, you're gonna vote me out because you don't like my policies and my politics. But just but this is who I am, I'm not hiding that from you.
Can I ask you a follow-up?
Yeah.
You mentioned the thought process. If you could describe that thought process, I'm trying to say if you could describe it in cognitive terms, like a word.
They're very much in the sense of this bill is good for everybody. Here's why it's good for everybody. There was a bill that Megan Hunt did on we should pay a minimum wage to tipped waiters and waitresses. Right?
Let me ask a question. Yeah. What would be a quality of cognition, or what would be a thing that would result in what you just described?
Man, I'm trying to think.
I'm leading you. I'm trying to suggest that it's reason and rationality.
Sure.
There's a process for that.
Yeah, and they're very much here's the evidence I'm using to base my decision. Here are papers that support my position. They post those. And they're very much here's the evidence on my side.
Yeah.
And they're very clear about this is where I'm getting my information from. This is where I came to my conclusions from. And people are getting back to them if they're wrong about it, here's what you should read instead. And that's what you want, right? Follow the evidence, go from there.
So we talk about science all the time, but before science or bigger than science is this whole concept of reason. And so science is popular now, but a lot of people, well, thank you for
Sure, thank you.
Last question.
Yeah.
This is apropos of nothing that you've talked about so far today, so I apologize.
Yeah.
But just speaking generally from your perspective, what does atheist activism need today that you do not see in the sphere?
More conversations about how it applies to everybody. And this is getting back to the thing about reason matters when we're coming to our decisions. Like, honestly, I don't know if this is just a movement thing or me thing. Like, I don't care if God exists or, like, that question about God's existence does nothing for me now. Like, I've reached my conclusion, so I'm done with it. But what I care about is, like, all this stuff. And I feel like a lot of the times if you're doing a gathering of atheists like this is not the focus. It might be, let's talk about why the Bible is not true. It's about that other stuff. And to me, I feel like those resources are out there now in a way that probably weren't around when I was coming into my own on these issues. So it doesn't mean as much to me. I'm not saying they're useless. It's useful for people who are new, all that stuff. But I would like to see them tackle these issues that are not strictly religion-based.
Yeah.
So like, cheap plug for myself. David mentioned the book Queer Disbelief that I helped publish. That book is all about LGBTQ rights, which I'm a cis straight guy, like what do I know about these issues? But this is stuff that the opposition to those rights comes from religion. That's where we should focus some attention. Science education, sex education. We can look to science reports, studies people have done. That's, if we care about atheism, to me that's really saying we care about critical thinking and reason-based and science and evidence and stuff like that. Good. Let's apply that to other stuff that is affecting people's lives. I feel like when I'm in a gathering of a bunch of atheists, they don't go further when it comes to how we apply reason and evidence. It's like, let's talk about the Bible and why it's dumb. But not, let's talk about mass incarceration, which is not an atheism issue, but it's one that's rife with bad information and misinformation, and we can talk about that as atheists who care about reason and evidence. I would like to see more of that.
Thank you very much.